Hello viewers, my name is Layton Pullen. This is my wife, Pullen. I'm going to narrate to you a story about COVID-19, how I got COVID-19 and recovered. So this year, around July the 12th, I came into contact with somebody who I didn't know had COVID. That person later on passed away from COVID. So on the 19th, I was traveling to Bulawayo. I work in Collinborn. So I contacted this person in Gwanda, and then I proceeded to Bulawayo. That very evening when I got home, I started feeling a little bit tired, and my temperature was going up. So, but I managed to spend the night at home. In the morning, I wasn't really feeling too good. Movement was even now difficult. So we ended up going to the hospital at UBH, where I did a COVID test. And I tested positive for COVID-19. After that, I actually came back home. By that time, I was very weak. I wasn't moving much. So we contacted a doctor who we attend church with, and she advised us to get an oximeter. That was to check my saturation. And my saturation had dropped quite badly. It was on about 50%. Then she advised us to immediately rush to Mater Dei Hospital, where I went, and I was admitted into their isolation ward. That was on the 13th of July. I spent a couple of days in the isolation ward. I was being given oxygen, and prior to that, prior to getting the COVID-19, I suffer from diabetes and kidney failure. So I had those underlying conditions, which was now a challenge to me, because already that was a dangerous thing for me to get COVID-19 with underlying conditions. So when they admitted me to the isolation ward, I was then put on dialysis, because I was already doing dialysis for my kidney failure. So I was doing dialysis on, I think that was my third day in admission. From there, I literally passed out. I totally knocked off, and I woke up on the 20th of August. That's when I opened my eyes. I have no memory of what happened during that time when I passed out. Possibly my wife can then narrate to you what transpired, because I've got no memory of that. I was on a ventilator, and that was it. I got up on the 20th of August after passing out.
Okay, so from where he left off, I was called in by his physician, Dr. Nube, Dr. K. Nube, very wonderful lady, very patient. She, you have no idea, but there's no doctors. If there could be more doctors like her, many lives would be saved. She called me and she said, he's not doing too well today. And I got up. Just don't like. I called his mom, and we rushed to the hospital. And then she said, no, come to third floor. Got papers I need you to sign. He's not looking good. She had been phoning every day, you know, with an update, but that day something in her voice.
Eli, can you bring us some tissue?
Just didn't go well with me. But she said to me, Renee, I have to put him on a ventilator. I can't say. She was very honest. She she told me no one has made it off the vent. So I can't say, but I need you to sign here. He's really tired. And you know, when doctors tell you that somebody's tired in their language, and she said, Dr. Kwaze is a good anesthetist. He's already in the room. So my mother-in-law said to me, no, you stay here. Let me go and be with him. You just remain. Then you guys will come down because you have to suit up to go into that room. So she was like, I had already called Dr. Kwaze, the anesthetist, to start. So whether you were going to sign or not going to sign, I had already called him. So I said, Doc, look, you are the doctor. I'll do whatever. So we signed, and by the time we got down, he was already on the ventilator. And I knew we had a good doctor in both of them because they did come out, and that's when Dr. Kwaze again just mentioned, look, I'm going to make him rest for a couple of days, then I'm going to try and take him off. Then he was like, it's a risky thing to do, you know, but we'll just give it 15 days and we'll see how it goes. So during that time, every day I was getting an update, either from Dr. Kwaze or from Dr. Ncube. Dr. Kwaze then one morning, I think after like 9 days, tried to remove him because every day I was actually sending him an app on his phone, but I had his phone. But I would tell him how our day went, how we miss him, how he needs to come back. He actually didn't, he only saw the messages a few days ago.
Oh, okay.
So on Christmas days when he saw the messages, and he was like, you've been sending me messages. What if I didn't come back? But I knew he would. Even when Dr. Kwaze put him on that, and he told my mother-in-law and myself that, look, we've never taken anyone off. There was only a lady that removed the thing by herself, but not that we removed her. She actually just pulled out the vent by herself. So it's a 50-50. And I told him, Doc, you put my husband on that vent and you are going to take him off. With the help of God, you are going to remove him. And he, even when he took him off, he told him that your wife told me that you are coming back. I don't know, but I had this faith. We would pray every day with these boys. We would just pray. But if I tell you, today is my first time crying. I've never cried through that whole situation because God was there with us in everything. I then tested positive 2 weeks after him, after all of them, including my sons, were positive. And I got very sick, very sick. I couldn't walk as well, but I didn't go to hospital or anything. We got medication from the pharmacy and I was just taking that. But even when I was sick, the hospital would call and ask for insulin, ask for drugs that weren't there. I would get up and go take him the medication. Around the 17th of August, they called me one morning. They said to me, Mrs. Pullen, it was around 6:30. We are moving him. And I was like, moving him where to? And they said to me, inside, into ICU. I was in my pajamas and I drove to Mater Day in I don't know what speed. And I got there and they were just coming in with him and, you know, had all these people around him, others carrying the vent, and he was knocked out. And then they said to me, you're going to see him in a few minutes. Can you just wait here? Let us go in. Because what they were doing was putting him on the vent and taking him off to try and breathe for himself. So after like 9 days, Dr. Kwaze then started that, because he would tell me today he was breathing very well and his brain activity was very good. So then after a couple of hours, they would call me, say, we had to put him back on the vent. His saturation was dropping. And then after 2 days, he would try again, say, I'm trying today. I'm going to remove him. And I remember he spent 3 days not being on the vent. He was actually breathing by himself. And they were happy, so happy. And I don't know what happened, whoop. In the middle of the night, they called me. And I thought, oh my God. They told me he's in distress. You know, they just said to me, Mrs. Pullen, it's not good. He's in distress, so we've had to put him back. And this was now day 18 or day 20. And I thought, we were getting along very fine. And then, we're back to square one. So, I just went there and I asked the sister, I said, sister, can you please open the window? I need to pray for my husband.
You're not allowed to get in?
No. And she opened the window and I prayed. I remember I prayed for him. And I just told God, this is your person. You gave this person to me. But if you want, it's time for him to go home. It's cool. Let your will be done. But his children still need him. He's got things that he left that we hadn't sorted out. And so he spent another week on the vent, no being removed, no anything. He was actually, he was deteriorating. But I thank God every day for those 2 doctors. Sometimes Dr. Nube wouldn't she would be there for like 3-4 hours just by his side, trying to do blood tests, trying to, and then we go back to the part where they were moving him into ICU. I got there and I didn't like what I had seen. He was looking terrible. So they managed to make him comfortable and everything. And then they told me we have to put him back on the vent because he's been distressed, that movement from out there to in here. And so that's what they did. And I got there. And then they told me we are no longer going to sedate him. So in a couple of hours, he's going to open his eyes. And I sat there and I cleaned him up. It was wasn't really, his beard was, I just cut his beard I asked, can I just freshen him up? And I did that. And he started rolling, opening his eyes, but he still was still on the vent. And I asked, is he in pain? They were like, no, he's not in any pain at all. His body is probably just tired, really tired from the COVID, from everything. And then after 2-3 days, they said to me, we're going to try again to remove him. Yes. And they did. They tried, but they removed him off the vent, but they kept the tubes in for another week. So he couldn't talk. He could see us, and he could hear.
But he couldn't talk.
He couldn't move his body and he couldn't talk. And so when he opened his eyes, he was trying to ask me, because I told him, you've been out for like 27 days, 30 days, because he was like shocked. And then Dr. Nube had told me, once he comes to, you need to tell him so that he doesn't get confused. So I told him, you had COVID and you've been on the ventilator, but he had the tubes in his nose and in his mouth, and he couldn't talk. So he just kept saying, Then I said to him, you've got tubes in your mouth and your nose, so you can't speak. But he couldn't lift his hands as well. He couldn't move because I remember we had to keep turning him with the help of the nurses in there. And then eventually after 1 week, Dr. Kwazi said, I'm going to try now. Since he's much stronger, I want to remove that tube. And Dr. Kwazi told him, now you have to breathe. I want to remove the tube. You have to breathe by yourself. And so he told me, I'm going to do it in the morning, but I think he knew I was scared. So he told me I'm going to do it at 12. So he said to me, Mrs. Pullen, let's meet here at 12. And I removed the tube and you see him. But he went there early in the morning, because when I got there at 9, the tubes were out. So I think you can continue.
Yeah, well, so when I came to, obviously I was confused. I didn't know what was happening. I obviously realized I'm in the hospital. She was there, and then the Dr. Ncube was also there, and then she started explaining I had COVID and I'd been out for 26 odd days, and they then explained to me that they're gonna need to take the tubes out, and I needed to breathe. I needed to really breathe for myself, so that I don't rely on the machine anymore. So they pulled out the tubes. There was no pain, thankfully. And then basically my body was limp. I couldn't move anything. I just had probably these 2 fingers were all I could move. And it was a very stressful time. If I got tired of sleeping on my back, I couldn't even tell anybody that I want to turn. So I developed relationships with the nurses who could sort of pick out, like with signs. I would use my head. If I wanted to turn, I would do this, and then they would understand. They would guess, is your back, is it your shoulder? And eventually they would get to, you want to turn. So a few of them now sort of understood me, that if I do this, I want to turn. If I wanted my legs moved, I would use my fingers and I would just indicate. So it was frustrating, and then they eventually took out the tubes. When the tubes came out, because they had been in my throat for so long, the voice box, I think, got damaged. So I actually didn't have a voice. I would just make a sound. So even drinking water, I couldn't drink water. I could just take a teaspoon just to wet my tongue, because if I tried to swallow, I would choke. I still had a tube that was feeding me. So the breathing tube was out, but I had a tube that was feeding me. Like I was on a liquid diet. So they would just inject food straight into my stomach. So drinking water was out. I couldn't actually drink water. So then a week or so passed, and then I started moving my legs, of which even the doctors, because COVID is something new, they couldn't say to me, your recovery is going to be X amount of days. So every day when something happened, it would be like news or an event. He moved his leg by himself. Oh, today he actually lifted his arm, and slowly, and then I was on oxygen. I had the nasal prongs which were giving me oxygen, because my saturation, whilst it had greatly improved, it wasn't 100%. So normally you'd operate between 95 to 100% saturation. That's how a normal person would. But my saturation was like on 80%. So I was relying a lot on the oxygen. So that took another week until my lungs actually then were able to breathe, and I could now take in and out oxygen by myself. So slowly I was weaned off the oxygen, and then I came off the oxygen, and now I was in ICU. So that was the recovery. I was doing my dialysis from where I was, and the whole explanations as to what had happened. Slowly the information was being given to me, and eventually I got discharged. So it was a bit stressing because when you're in ICU, you don't sleep. It's intensive care. So there's sick people all around you with different conditions. So they don't actually like switch off the lights in the night. The lights are on. Everyone is connected onto machines. There's alarms going off. There's beeping noises. That teet constantly. So sleeping was like really a nightmare. I would sleep because I was tired, but I wouldn't have a normal sleep that you would ordinarily have because ICU is 24 hours. So eventually I told the doctor, look, I'm now tired. I need to actually sleep and not just nod off because I'm too tired. I wanted to sleep. So then they were like, it's a bit risky to discharge you at the moment. You're not moving, you're not walking. But I was now talking, and I said, no, doc, I'm sure I can get a nurse aide or somebody to look after me, and I'll be at home. So before discharging me, they needed to do the necessary checks because I had been lying in a bed for more than 30 days. It was now going on to 2 months that I was in a bed without coming out of the bed. So they needed to check blood clots, the intestines, will they operate well, they won't twist, because if that happens, I now need an emergency op, which would have been even dangerous after that whole period of time. So they did their necessary tests, and they were happy. They were like, fine, you can go home. So I got a nurse aide, and I came home, and I was still bedridden. I couldn't do anything. They had to feed me, they had to bath me, they would carry me around. If I needed to go to the hospital, I needed to be carried into the car, out of the car, because I was still doing the dialysis even after being discharged. So then I started doing physio. Slowly but surely my body started responding, and I actually lost about 20 kgs whilst I was on the vent. I was really bad. I mean, there were bones on my body that were showing all over. So I needed to actually put on weight just so that I would have the strength and the muscle to move and do stuff. So I started picking up weight, and eventually through the physio I started walking, and then now I'm almost 100%. I am driving, I'm doing everything back to normal, but I still get those days when I'll be just tired. I'll just go to town, and then I'll start feeling tired, and I'll just come back home and knock right out and sleep. So even then, it's talking to the doctor, today I'm feeling like this, and there's no real timeline to say that if you're recovering from COVID, by this time, it'll be okay. And then I go on the internet, I find out that other people, mostly in other countries, because here there's no referral, there's no one who actually came out of the vent who I can say, how are you feeling? I'm feeling this. So now I'm relying on stories from people in South Africa, the UK, and other places who have come out of the vent. And some of the stories are just sad, because some people, a year later, they still can't walk, they still can't smell. Others, memory loss, hair loss. I had patches, but now it's grown back. And, so all that is new, but there's other instances where if I talk a lot, my voice ends up getting hoarse. So I think there's more recovery, but I can say I'm possibly 90% fully recovered. Yeah, so we're taking it each day at a time.
And did they ever explain really what caused you to shut down? Was it because of the underlying conditions?
So COVID, from my understanding, attacks your lungs. So basically my lungs had collapsed. So that's why they put me on a vent, because then the ventilator inflates and puts oxygen directly into the lungs. So the machine was actually keeping me alive. So one of the things before they discharged me, they did the whole scan, and the scan results were saying that my lungs were still scarred from the COVID. But the recovery, so I think lungs as well are an organ that recovers by itself if you give it a chance. It rejuvenates itself. So even when I came home, I used oxygen, I think, for about 2 or 3 days. But then through the physio, the exercise, the breathing improved. Because my saturation when I was discharged was on about 90%. So it would play between 90 and 93, which was low, but my body was operating on that level. So ideally, you should be 95 and above. But because I had COVID, the reason for it being below 95 was because of the COVID, and I wasn't in distress. So when you've got COVID, you won't be able to breathe. So you'll be in distress. But I was able to breathe. But because my lungs were still healing, my saturation wouldn't be 100%. But then after, so I was discharged in September. I left Mater Dei in September. By the end of September, my saturation was 95% and above, because I wouldn't actually come out of bed. The nurse would like stretch my legs, stretch my arms, which meant that when they do that, I breathe more. So I was getting more oxygen into my lungs, and my saturation was improving with the exercise. Then towards end of September, I then started doing short walks. So if I would walk like 5 meters, I would be so tired. I could sleep for hours just from walking 5 meters. And that improved, and we kept on and kept going further and further until I could actually walk. And yeah, so even sometimes it depends on the day. That's why I'm saying that even when I ask the doctor, there is no actual information to say that days are going to be like this. There's some days when I'll get up in the morning and I'll be like, you know what, I'm tired, and I'll just sleep. And they actually told me, you know what, it's going to take you more than a year, because that's what they have on record. People take more than a year to actually recover. Even then, some people never get their memory back. So like in my case, I do remember things, but during the period that I was out, and a few days after, you know, so I was going through my phone, and that's when I was like, but you were sending me messages, and this is like July, I was already out by then. And she was like, no, you know what, I had to keep talking to you because it also made me feel like you're going to recover, because I didn't want to believe that you're not going to recover. And honestly, there's a lot of people that died. We were plenty of us in that isolation ward, and a lot of people didn't make it. The very strong people would come in 1-2 days and they're out. Then those were people who would actually have no underlying conditions. But anyone else who was spending more than a week, 5 days, they didn't make it. And there's a lot of people, even the people I was doing dialysis with, who then passed on. They actually came in when I was under. They would come in 2 days, gone. So it was quite a stressful time for them as well, my family, because there's even friends and relatives who actually died of COVID. So it was a stress to everyone that, you know what, will he make it? Will he make it? So, and it was a long, long journey. A lot of people were happy. Yeah, I would really like to appreciate Dr. Gwazi and Dr. Ngube, because they walked me through this, and they kept fighting and against all odds, because I had underlying conditions, and they just, they would try and make it sound as positive as possible, but they knew that no one had actually come off the vent. So for me, I was really a miracle for them. And I think all the prayers, family, friends, strangers, when I actually came to, people would come and say, you don't know me, but I would come to your bedside and just watch you breathing. The staff at the hospital, people would be in the windows, because remember, after I passed almost 15 days, there'd no one who had reached that stage. So it was now news to everyone in the hospital that, no, there's this guy, and we're now on day 20 and he's still alive. And it was now spreading the whole hospital. So even when I got up, people would come, doctors would come. You don't know me. I'm Dr. So and so. I came 2 days, I was watching you on the vent, and so yeah, today they really pushed. We went through difficult situations. It's not cheap. There's a lot of money that we still have to pay, and look, they're being patient with me as well, and it's quite a story for them as well. So it was quite a journey, and even the nursing staff, these guys had to be patient with me. Imagine dealing with somebody who can't talk, but they're alive and they're well, but they can't say anything to you. Even if I had an itch somewhere, I couldn't say to anyone, hey, scratch me down there or turn me or what, So they were very patient, and I was so grateful. Some of them, I remember them, some of them, I don't remember them. But I do meet them. Now when I go for dialysis and today, I bump into somebody in the corridor, they won't believe that it's me, because I was that thin. So now they'll be like, sorry, and then I'll say, no, it's Pullen, and they'll be like, oh my God, and some of them get so excited, we start praying, and people are just, it was quite a thing that we went through, but a lot of positiveness from all around, my wife especially. Sometimes even when I was recovering, I'll think about it to say, your relatives, friends will pray and they'll give words of encouragement, but the person who actually went through a lot was her. She had to be strong. If anything, she had to keep talking to me, even though I was unconscious. But the fact that she kept that spirit and kept it up. And even my kids, when I came home, they were so happy. My other son, there's a friend of his, he lost his dad from COVID. We actually admitted around the same time, and he goes to school with the boy, and it's a bad situation, and we always ask, how is he doing? And there's a lot of stress. So for us, there's a lot to be thankful for. It was really a trying time. It was really a trying time, and I think God really had a big hand to say, it's not your time. I'll raise you from this. You've got the diabetes, your kidneys are not working, but you'll come out of this. And thank God we've had Christmas and celebrations all around, and now we're looking forward to the new year. It's just sad that there's other people who didn't make it, but yeah, I hope other people, especially now that you're telling the story, will find positivity and really believe that you can be cured and healed. I didn't have a chance with my underlying conditions, but here I am talking to you today.